One rein to each horse, and it goes straight through from here to the outside of each horse.
When we would go carriage driving, well, first of all, he'd take me on a different route every day, and I do not know how he managed to do that.
What if the most overlooked grandchild of Queen Elizabeth, the one who took a simple job at a garden centre, was actually being secretly positioned to receive the biggest piece of the royal fortune? While the world was obsessed with Prince Harry's royal exit and Prince William's growing fortune, something shocking was unfolding behind palace walls. In her final years, Queen Elizabeth made private decisions about her personal fortune that were designed to rock the House of Windsor and deeply unsettle one key person in particular, Queen Camilla. Enter Lady Louise Windsor, the 22-year-old granddaughter you have probably never even heard of. The story of what Lady Louise quietly inherited and what it reveals about the Queen's true opinion of Camilla's family is the one secret the palace desperately tried to bury. Stick with us because the details are jaw-dropping. We're talking about the Queen's favourite grandchild, a bond no one saw coming. But before we get to what Lady Louise inherited, you need to understand the incredibly close relationship she shared with her grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. Their bond was one of Buckingham Palace's best-kept secrets. Lady Louise Alice Elizabeth Mary Mountbatten Windsor entered the world on November 8, 2003, under truly dramatic circumstances involving her mother. Her mother, Sophie the Countess of Wessex, was rushed to Frimley Park Hospital after suffering a sudden and dangerous placental abruption. Louise's father, Prince Edward, was on an official trip to Mauritius and tragically missed the entire ordeal. She was delivered via an emergency caesarean section with both mother and child facing life-threatening blood loss. The tiny premature baby was immediately transferred to the neonatal unit at St George's Hospital in London. Her fragile state and vulnerability sparked deep and personal concern from the Queen herself. Louise's traumatic entry into the world sparked a powerful protective instinct in the Queen, which would shape their relationship for the next 20 years, and her challenges didn't end there. She was born with a condition called esotropia, causing a misalignment in her eyes that required multiple surgeries throughout her childhood. As the Queen's youngest granddaughter, with a significant age gap between her and her older cousins, Louise seemed to unlock a tender side of the monarch that very few people ever got to see. A palace insider revealed in 2019 that the Queen clearly favoured Louise, saying she absolutely treasured their time at Balmoral and had formed a special bond with her and then her brother James. This stunning display of favouritism was especially notable, placing her ahead of older cousins like William and Harry. The insider also mentioned how Louise charmed everyone at Balmoral by stepping up to help Prince William and Kate look after their children during big family holidays. She was even seen patiently teaching Princess Charlotte how to draw little rabbits and deer. And because of Louise's obvious artistic talent, the Queen even gave her special access to Queen Victoria's personal sketches from the Highlands, a collection that was rarely ever shared. Joe Little, who is the managing editor of Majesty magazine, once explained that the Queen and Louise had a truly unique bond simply because Louise was her youngest granddaughter. Her difficult start and fragile health had deeply worried her grandparents, which only made them cherish her all the more. Royal reporter Rebecca English shared a touching story she heard from a palace staffer about the Queen sitting with Louise and her brother James to watch the kids' show Mr. Tumble together. Apparently the Queen would pop over to their home near Windsor, or they'd come to her just to share this simple, lovely bit of time watching television. It was in these quiet moments, far from the cameras and official duties, that the groundwork was laid for huge decisions that would eventually shake the entire royal family. Prince Philip's most prized possessions, this was the first major inheritance. That Lady Louise holds a special place in the royal family is a fact Prince Philip made perfectly clear. When he passed away on April 9, 2021, at the age of 99, the world watched his funeral at Windsor Castle. Their two beautiful fell ponies, Balmoral Nevis and Knotlaw Storm, stood patiently beside his dark green carriage. Resting on the carriage seat were Philip's signature driving cap, his leather gloves, a whip, and even a red tub of sugar lumps for his beloved ponies. These items represented Philip's deep connection with his ponies. He famously took up competitive carriage driving in 1971 after arthritis forced him to give up polo. He even represented Great Britain in 6 World Championships and 3 European Championships, still competing at a high level well into his 80s. And the carriage at the heart of the procession was his latest model. It was built to his exact specifications, designed with his deep expertise. And Philip left that carriage, those ponies, and his entire legacy to Lady Louise. After all, he had personally taught her carriage driving all through her teenage years. The two spent countless hours together in Windsor Great Park, practicing with the horse-drawn carriages. In a 2020 interview, her mother, Sophie, proudly mentioned that Louise simply had a natural gift for the sport. In 2019, Prince Philip was there to proudly watch Louise compete in the private driving singles at the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She came in third, and his pride was obvious to everyone. So after his death, his decision to leave these treasured possessions to Louise felt incredibly powerful and meaningful. This was more than just an inheritance. It was the passing of a torch. And Louise was ready to continue his legacy. In 2022, she drove one of Philip's own carriages at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, leading a parade as Queen Elizabeth watched from the stands with tears streaming down her face. By 2024, Louise was competing at the British National Carriage Driving Championships, managing to place second in her class. She competed under the royal surname Mountbatten Windsor, showing she didn't just inherit Philip's possessions, but his fierce competitive spirit as well. This inheritance from Philip was really just setting the stage for what the Queen would do next, leading to a huge story and some serious controversy. The Queen's private estate is something most people completely misunderstand. To really understand what Lady Louise might inherit from the Queen, you have to know the difference between the Crown's assets and her personal fortune. This is what confuses so many people, and it's right where the biggest inheritance issues really begin. Queen Elizabeth had an incredibly complex relationship with money and property. She was the head of a family sitting on around $28 billion in real estate through the Crown Estate, but almost none of that wealth was personally hers. The Crown Estate includes famous landmarks like Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and Kensington Palace. A public board manages this entire estate, and it belongs to the monarchy as an institution, not to the individual monarch. It automatically gets passed from one king or queen to the next, but Elizabeth had a separate personal fortune estimated at £500 million at her death. This included Balmoral Castle in Scotland, which is valued at around £80 million, and also the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, worth about £250 million. These properties were bought privately by her family many years ago and belonged only to her, but it wasn't just about real estate. Elizabeth's personal belongings included over 300 pieces of fine jewellery that were specifically hers, not part of the crown jewels. She also owned a truly remarkable collection of racehorses and a private car collection. She even held investment portfolios that could be worth over £100 million when adjusted for growth. A crucial point here is that transfers between monarchs are exempt from the standard 40% inheritance tax, thanks to a 1993 deal with the government. This means that when Elizabeth's personal wealth was passed to King Charles, he received the entire amount completely tax-free. However, Elizabeth could choose exactly who would receive specific items, properties, or parts of her estate before she died, and reports say she made some shocking decisions. A source spoke to Radar Online in July of 2022, just 2 months before her death. They said she'd been focusing on her favourite items and deciding who deserved what, with whispers of last-minute changes to her will that would shock the heirs. These 11th-hour changes reportedly sparked fury among certain members of the royal family. The jewellery war, Kate versus Camilla, and the planting of some very resentful seeds. The first major point of conflict involved the Queen's personal jewellery collection, which set the tone for everything that came next. Reports claim Queen Elizabeth chose to leave about $110 million worth of her personal jewellery out of 300 pieces to Catherine, the Princess of Wales. This was a massive gift and really showed the close bond that had developed between the Queen and Kate in the last months of Elizabeth's life. However, this particular decision caused a lot of anger in one part of the palace, Camilla's. An insider told Radar Online, quote, "Kate is clearly the family favourite." They added, "She'd never say it, but it's one of the big reasons Camilla resents Kate." To understand why this is so important for Lady Louise, you need to see the bigger picture. Queen Elizabeth was not sharing her wealth fairly. She was making very specific choices that showed she favoured those she felt closest with while completely ignoring others. Camilla's net worth is around $5 million, which is a tiny sum compared to the royal family's vast wealth. And even though she has access to incredible resources through her husband Charles, the Queen's decisions about her own estate revealed where her true loyalties were, and Camilla was not the only one paying attention. Her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, were on the edges of the royal world, seeing all the wealth being shared but never being fully inside the family circle. Tom Parker Bowles, who is a famous food critic and author, has become much closer to Buckingham Palace and now often attends events with his mother. Some European media outlets even suggest he could benefit from King Charles's future will, but that all hinges on Charles's choices and Camilla's influence. Queen Elizabeth's estate was hers to give as she pleased, and she gave it to the people she loved the most, which explains why Edward and Sophie's family was quietly elevated. To really understand why Lady Louise could inherit a fortune from both Philip and Elizabeth, we have to look at her parents, Prince Edward and Sophie Duchess of Edinburgh, and their unique relationship with the late Queen. Prince Edward is the youngest of Queen Elizabeth's 4 children, and he's famously the one who caused her the least amount of trouble. While Charles was getting tabloid headlines for his love life, Andrew was facing scandals that shook the monarchy itself. But while Anne was fiercely independent, Edward chose to build a quiet, stable family life. Sophie Rhys-Jones married Edward in 1999 and soon became known as the Queen's favourite daughter-in-law, a title she earned through loyalty and tireless royal work. After leaving her public relations career in 2002, she committed to being a full-time working royal, now supporting over 70 charities. The Queen truly valued Sophie's discretion and warmth, and her commitment to raising Louise and James with a sense of royal duty and normalcy. Sophie once shared a story of a young Louise coming home from school, confused, asking her mum, "People keep saying that Grandma is the Queen." When Sophie asked how that made her feel, Louise simply replied, "I don't understand." To her, she wasn't a monarch, just her grandma. That genuine simplicity is what Elizabeth treasured, especially in a world filled with palace drama and media games. Edward and Sophie's home at Bagshot Park, a huge 120-room mansion in Surrey, represented normalcy, loyalty, and real family warmth. Sophie also insisted her children would most likely need to earn a living rather than simply relying on their royal privilege. Louise put this work ethic into practice, taking a summer job at a garden centre before starting university. This attitude was a sharp contrast to the entitlement and controversy that surrounded other royal branches when King Charles made Edward the Duke of Edinburgh in 2023. It was confirmation that Edward's family had fully earned the monarchy's trust. And with that trust came inheritance potential and the quiet rise of Lady Louise the Royal that nobody expected. What makes Lady Louise so fascinating is her rise happened almost entirely out of the spotlight. While her cousins William and Harry grabbed global headlines, Louise focused on her education. She attended St. George's School right there at Windsor Castle, before moving to St. Mary's School in Ascot to complete her A-levels. She chose to study English history, politics and drama, showing her curiosity about public life. Then, in September 2022, just days after her grandmother died, Louise began studying English at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. That's the same university where Prince William met Kate Middleton 20 years ago, and royal watchers definitely noticed the connection. Louise's next move was a surprise. In 2024, she joined the Taforth University Officer Training Corps, a British Army Reserve unit. Pictures showed her wearing full military gear, complete with face paint and a helmet marked Windsor as she trained with peers. By 2025, she was an officer cadet in the Army Reserve. Louise's journey really echoes that of Queen Elizabeth. At only 16 years old, the Queen did her first official duty during World War II inspecting troops at Windsor Castle. By 18, she had joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, becoming the very first female royal to actively serve in the armed forces. Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams notes that Lady Louise takes after both of her grandparents. He observed that Louise is shy like the Queen, but she absolutely excels in Prince Philip's favourite sport of carriage driving. Louise's LinkedIn profile hints at an interest in the military diplomacy or law. These fields would prepare her well for a future as a working royal, something Fitzwilliams says is incredibly important. With only 4 working royals under 70, many have discussed Lady Louise eventually taking on a bigger royal role. So in the end, Louise isn't just in line to inherit wealth, but she may also play a huge role within the monarchy, a role that Camilla's children could never fill. Camilla's family is furious and the inheritance battle is happening behind closed doors. The main problem is Camilla and her family's sheer disappointment with the inheritance after Queen Elizabeth's death. Even though Camilla was named future Queen Consort, she received very few personal gifts from the Queen. Most jewellery went to Kate, with other important items going to the grandchildren. Camilla is now reportedly worried about future inheritances involving Prince Harry. Reports say she's influencing Charles's will to reduce Harry's share and favour her son, Tom Parker Bowles. And she is supposedly frustrated about Lady Louise, who is a direct blood descendant of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Lady Louise is 17 in line for the throne and has received personal gifts directly from her grandparents. In contrast, Tom lacks royal blood and faces certain limitations despite his position. For Camilla, this isn't just about money or jewellery, it is a battle for status and family influence. By choosing not to use her HRH title, Lady Louise shows a humility that may keep her very relevant within the royal family. In the British royal family, it's often the people who don't crave power who end up with everything. And there's more.